This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going right into the middle of World War II with the Battle of Midway.
Okay.
We've got some really interesting stuff from Mr. Hutchings History to work with.
Yeah.
We're going to try to figure out why this battle was so important by looking at technology, leadership, and even a little bit of luck.
Sure.
So get ready for some twists and turns because this battle really changed how the war in the Pacific went.
Absolutely. And we'll see how these small decisions, they can have big consequences.
Yeah.
And, we're going to look at how historians see this same event in different ways.
Okay.
Because even in history, there can be more than one way to look at things.
Okay, so let's set the stage.
Okay.
By the summer of 1942, the
Yeah.
Japanese Empire was really doing well in the Pacific.
Huh?
They wanted to create what they called a Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere.
Right?
And after Pearl Harbor, well, they seemed unstoppable.
Right. But there's something really important here that people often forget.
It was,
When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor,
yeah.
they didn't destroy the American aircraft carriers.
Oh, right.
Those carriers were out at sea,
Okay.
and them surviving, well, that changed everything.
Where? So this little thing about the carriers
Yeah.
being out at sea
Uh-huh.
ended up changing everything.
Right.
Talk about a butterfly effect.
Exactly. And this is where Midway comes in.
Okay.
It's a turning point in naval warfare,
Okay.
where battleships start to become less important,
Right.
and aircraft carriers, well, they become the main force at sea.
I see.
The Japanese, with their advanced carrier fleet, they were leading this change.
Right.
They brought 4 really powerful carriers to Midway:
Okay. Which ones?
the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu.
Wow, 4 of them.
All of them have been in battles before.
Uh-huh.
And they carried these really scary Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighter planes.
I've heard those Zero fighters were really hard to shoot down.
Yeah, they were. But on the American side,
Yeah.
a different kind of powerful plane was coming up.
What was the...
The Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bomber.
Okay.
And this plane, well, it would become super important at Midway.
Oh, I bet those dive bombers were more than a match for the Japanese carriers, weren't they?
You got it. You see, the Dauntless could attack very accurately from a steep dive.
I see.
And Japanese carriers, they were built for attacking.
Okay.
So they were more vulnerable to this kind of attack.
So that's how technology can completely change who has the advantage in a war.
It is, yeah.
Fascinating. So we have this clash of technology.
Yeah,
But we also have a clash of leadership.
that's right.
On the Japanese side, you've got Admiral Nagumo leading the attack.
Right.
And for the Americans, you've got Admiral Chester Nimitz back at Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And then Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance leading the task force.
Uh-huh.
And what's really interesting here is how different their approaches were.
Okay.
At the beginning of the battle, Nagumo is super confident.
Right.
He launches an attack on Midway Island, thinking he's going to crush any American resistance. But while Nagumo was being overconfident, the Americans had a secret weapon working in their favor.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
Intelligence.
Intelligence.
American codebreakers.
Right.
Led by this guy, Joseph Rochefort,
I know him, yeah.
had cracked the Japanese Navy's main communication code, the JN-25 code.
Wow.
This meant that Nimitz knew about Yamamoto's plan to attack Midway.
He did.
He knew when, he knew where, he even knew what ships the Japanese were bringing.
Wow. Talk about an intelligence advantage. So Nimitz has got this amazing intel.
Yeah.
What does he do with it?
Well, he sets a trap, right?
Right. He puts his carriers north of Midway,
Okay.
just waiting for Nagumo to walk right in.
Okay.
And this is where Spruance comes in.
Okay.
He makes his bold decision, kind of a calculated risk.
Okay.
He decides to launch his planes early,
Really?
even though they're almost out of fuel.
Wow. So Spruance is taking a big gamble.
He is.
But he's also counting on the element of surprise.
Exactly. He knows that attacking first is super important.
Yeah.
And that risk, well, it pays off.
So it's June 4th,
Uh,
and Spruance has launched his planes.
right.
What happens next?
Well, at 10:20 a.m.,
Okay.
American dive bombers from the Enterprise in Yorktown, they catch the Japanese fleet totally by surprise.
Wow.
Can you imagine the chaos on those Japanese carriers?
Yeah.
They were used to being the ones attacking.
Right.
And suddenly, they're the ones getting bombed from the sky.
And those Dauntless dive bombers we talked about?
Yeah.
They were about to show just how good they were.
I got it. The Dauntlesses, they could attack very accurately, and they caused a lot of damage.
Yeah.
And get this, within just 5 minutes.
5 minutes?
3 Japanese carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, they were all on fire.
5 minutes. That's incredible.
It is.
Talk about a turning point.
Yeah, it really shows how quickly things can change in a carrier battle.
Yeah.
It shows how important it is to make decisions fast and how powerful air power can be when you use it right.
But I'm guessing the Japanese weren't going to give up without a fight.
You're right, they weren't.
Okay.
The last Japanese carrier, the Hiryu, it launched a counterattack.
Okay.
And they actually managed to damage the Yorktown pretty badly.
Oh, wow.
So even though the Americans were winning,
yeah,
the Japanese were still a tough enemy.
Absolutely.
But the damage to the Yorktown, well, wouldn't be enough.
Okay.
By the end of the day, all 4 Japanese carriers were sunk.
Wow, what a huge loss for the Japanese.
It was.
It must have really changed things in the Pacific War.
It did, yeah.
Oh.
Losing those carriers and all those experienced pilots and crew,
Right.
it really weakened the Japanese fleet. It was a big hit to their morale.
Okay.
It made them realize they weren't invincible anymore.
So we've talked about the technology,
Right.
the leadership,
Yeah.
the intelligence,
Yeah.
and all the crazy things that happened in the battle itself.
We have.
But how do historians view Midway?
That's a good question.
It seems like such a crucial moment.
It is. Are there different opinions on how important it was?
You know, there are.
Go on.
You've got traditionalists. They see Midway as a big win for American courage and cleverness.
Okay.
They focus on how brave the American pilots were
Right.
and how smart commanders like Nimitz and Spruance were.
That's the classic underdog story, isn't it?
It is.
The Americans were outnumbered
Uh-huh.
and didn't have as many weapons.
Right.
But they used their skill and determination
Yeah.
and a little bit of luck to get this amazing victory.
Exactly.
Okay.
Then you have the revisionists.
Okay.
They see things a bit differently.
Okay.
They say that the Japanese were too confident
Okay.
and that they made some operational mistakes and that those mistakes played a big role in their defeat.
I see.
They point to Nagumo hesitating
Uh-huh.
and the fact that the Japanese carriers were vulnerable to dive bombing attacks.
So it's not just that the Americans were great,
Right.
but also that the Japanese made some big mistakes that helped the Americans win.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
And then you have the post-revisionists.
Okay.
They try to look at it from both sides.
Okay.
They say that the Americans did some things well
Right.
and that the Japanese made some mistakes and that Midway was a mix of all these things.
So it's not a simple story of good guys versus bad guys.
No, it's not.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah.
What about other perspectives?
Well, there are Marxist historians.
Okay.
They see Midway as a fight between powerful countries
Okay.
who all wanted to control resources and territory.
I see.
They focus on the economic and political reasons for the war.
It's interesting how the same event can be seen in so many different ways,
It is.
depending on who's looking at it.
It shows that history isn't just a simple story.
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
It's made up of lots of different perspectives and interpretations.
Yeah.
And it's our job to try to understand all of them.
But no matter how you look at it, Midway was a really important event. It changed who was in control in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And it showed that aircraft carriers were the new most important ships in naval warfare.
Absolutely.
It really makes you think about all those what-if moments in history, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what if those American carriers had been at Pearl Harbor?
Yeah.
What if they'd been sunk?
Right.
What if those codebreakers, what if they hadn't cracked that JN-25 code?
Yeah.
The whole Pacific War, it could have gone so differently.
And even beyond that, Midway had this lasting legacy, right?
It did.
It proved that these carrier-based aircraft, that was the future.
It was, yeah. It wasn't just about the ships that were lost
Yeah.
or the places that were captured. Midway, it really showed that things were changing.
Yeah.
From battleships to carriers.
Yeah.
The age of naval air power had really begun.
It had. And let's not forget those codebreakers.
Right.
Without them, who knows what would have happened?
Who knows?
They're the ones who gave Nimitz the information he needed to make those big decisions. It's like a classic David and Goliath story.
It is, yeah.
The Americans, they used their intelligence, took some calculated risks,
Right.
and they managed to beat an enemy that seemed much stronger.
Yeah, and Midway shows us that battles aren't just won with weapons.
Right.
They're won with information.
Yeah.
And being able to use that information quickly and decisively.
Midway also makes me think about leadership.
Yeah.
Spruance's decision to launch those planes early.
Right.
Even when they were low on fuel, that was a bold move.
It was.
It could have gone wrong.
Yeah.
But it really paid off.
It did. That's leadership in a crisis, isn't it?
I guess so.
You have to look at the risks. Trust your gut.
Right.
Be ready to make hard choices.
Yeah.
And sometimes those choices can change history.
So as we're wrapping up our deep dive into Midway, what do you think, listener?
What stands out to you?
What's the one thing you'll remember from this story?
Maybe it's how those small things, like the American carriers being out at sea during Pearl Harbor, can have a ripple effect and change everything.
Or maybe it's realizing that history isn't just a straight line.
Right.
It's all about different perspectives, interpretations, and all those what-ifs.
Whatever you take away from it.
Yeah.
Midway is a story that still matters today. It reminds us of the courage, the ingenuity. And sometimes the luck.
Right.
That shapes what happens to us.
And that's our deep dive into the Battle of Midway.
It is.
Hope you enjoyed it.
I did.
Until next time.
See ya.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the world around you.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.